everyone, my name is Ayandra Kiowa, and in this presentation I will be summarizing the high-risk findings for the Metasploitable 2 VM scans that I've run and the practical fixes that I also applied. So that went from stopping the vulnerable services, updating the open SSL, and just some few other things I will be getting into throughout the presentation. And I'll show the before and after, of course, as well, and explain the steps further, and then just kind of talking about how to reduce the system's attack surface as well. Alrighty, so I'm going to be starting off with part A in the next slides, and this is going to be taking you through the planning, organization, and performing the penetration testing. So why is planning important? It's because it's setting that boundary and preventing the accidental resource damage. And then also organization is important as well, because it's making sure that the test is going to be repeatable in the end and that the results are properly documented or captured. And I'll also be talking about why penetration testing is valuable as well. So I will start off here by talking about the planning. Then the steps are just giving kind of a breakdown of it. So here I did download and install the Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. After I was successful in installing it, I did make sure that the network settings were on host network, same as the Kali Linux box VM's network settings. This is important to make sure because you want that connection and everything to be running smoothly once I start that penetration testing and just running those scans. So I did make sure that the Kali Linux box was on host network, and as well as Metasploitable 2 VM to be on the host network. So the second one here is to open up both Metasploitable 2 VM and the Kali Linux box to begin the penetration testing process. Number 3, I decided on testing the method. The testing method that I chose was the black box approach. The reason I chose this, of course, is because we're doing a lab, so it simulates that real-world external attacker. Another thing here I did was identify the targets, which was the Metasploitable 2 IP address. So I did that through the command nmap 192.168.56.0, then with the /24. This actually helped me with making sure that I am identifying what the Metasploitable 2 VM's IP address is, and I will be showing you that later down the line throughout the presentation as well. And then also the next one here is that once the existing configurations were reviewed, I could now begin that running those scans on the system. So the organizing aspect here, the steps that I took were, first off, I did verify if the Metasploitable 2 VM is on and running. Once that was done, I was able to check if the tools are updated along with the configuration of the Kali Linux box. Number 3, I prepared basically to prepare those folders that were made for when the screenshots are saved, just so I can kind of document it throughout the process. And then the last here was to just kind of create that PowerPoint slide layout as preparation. So that was just my organization aspect through all of this, and that's what I chose to do. Alrighty, so I'm going to be starting to talk about the performing of the penetration testing process. So of course there's a lot of things to it. There's a bunch of scans that have to be run, and starting off, I checked the connectivity of the host through the command ifconfig. And then I also wanted to pinpoint the IP address of the Metasploitable 2 VM, which I mentioned earlier on. And as you can see, I ran the command nmap. So basically it was the nmap with the switch sn, which were lowercase, and then I also followed it by 192.168.56.0 with the /24. And as you can tell, I knew from my previous labs that my Kali box Linux VM, I knew that IP address, I knew the other one. So basically with the process of elimination, I was able to figure out that the 192.168.56.4 was my the target VM IP address. So I was able to figure that out. And then just going through all of these other scans as well. So I was able to run the nmap commands, I was able to run the nicto scan, and also run the OWASP scan as well. And then basically from there, confirming a vulnerability or security gap under safe conditions, and then I was able to rescan after mitigations were made and document the changes that were made as well. And then from here on the left, this was just kind of the screenshots, a little snapshots of each one that I did, just to take you guys through and see that I was able to perform each one successfully. and which ones I did and what information I was able to get for them. So next up, why is penetration testing valuable? And according to Cortez, he breaks it down as saying that it serves as a preventative measure, helping organizations identify and address potential weaknesses. And penetration testing is important because it helps us find the real security weaknesses before malicious actors can take advantage of them. And it organizes the risks based on prioritization according to possible impact. And pen testing also supports compliance requirements as well. So since many standards require regular testing to ensure systems are secure. And then security posture is enhanced as well, and it adds to its overall strengthening. And then lastly here, the results guide security enhancements by showing where to strengthen protections and then improve configurations or add safeguards. So next up here is handling the procedure failures. So if something were to go wrong, it's important to just first verify the target is actually online and reachable. Then you can confirm network settings such as IP, host only versus NAT, or a bridged adapter. Next, you can check your tool configurations and options next. If the VM or tools behave oddly, I would recommend also to restart the affected VM or reboot the host VM. And if it's needed, adapt the test method. So document the change and then kind of just continue on. And always, of course, capture the logs and have those screenshots available. And then, of course, you can revert back to a snapshot if a serious failure occurs. This is something I learned after, of course, that I did the lab, but I would also recommend that aspect to it as well. Alrighty, so on to part B, which are the scans on Metasploitable to VM in the next slides here. So here I have two screenshots available for you, and I will be doing more for the Nmap scan. So I did run quite a few Nmap scans here. So the first one here that I did was the Nmap 192.168.56.0 with the /24. And basically with this one, I did this one, I ran it, and I was able to kind of just see all the ports that were open. So port 21, port 22, and it kind of just gave me the idea of the state service. So if it was open, and just kind of telling me more information on there as well. So telnet, the FTP, SSH, stuff like that. And then also the one to my right is the Nmap with the switch P, which is lowercase p switch again, and then it says switch uppercase A with the 192.168.56.4. So here, once again, it gave me kind of the information that I got for the one on my left, but it kind of just went in more a little bit deeper. So kind of talking about the type, so like FTC, the FTP server status, and so on, which was great information that will be used later on as well. So here are a few more Nmap scans that I ran, and these ones were actually more information heavy, so it did give out like an output of more detailed kind of results than the ones that I had previously. And the first one up here being the Nmap with the switch lowercase s with the uppercase x, followed by, of course, 192.168.56.4. And I'm just going to run these one as well, so you can just kind of follow along of what all information I provided here as well. And this was a nice one that I ran, and this is because it kind of told me that the machine is live and it's running many services like a vulnerable test VM. The exit scan was ambiguous for most ports. It's just kind of telling you whether they're open or being filtered or dropped by a firewall. So the next one here that I ran was Nmap with the switch top, followed by another switch, ports 30. It was followed by 192.168.56.4. And it's telling me that the host is online, there's many services that are running, gave me more details on that, and then basically told me there is multiple potentially vulnerable services, and saying that this target is likely intentionally insecure, so training CTF or the VM. And then the last one was one that I really loved, which you can see on the top over here on the left. And basically this one was the Nmap 192.168.56.4 with the followed by switch script, and then it's VULN for vulnerability. And this one was great with giving me details on the vulnerabilities. And as you can tell, I kind of got a snapshot or a screenshot, of course, of one of the ones that it showed me, which was the SSL slash TLS. And you can see how much information that provided, which was great. So this host was basically what it's showing me is that the host has high risk vulnerabilities, and it gave me nice rundown of all the vulnerabilities as well with this scan. So it's saying that there is one that is including remote root access via the FTP backdoor, and then there's another one that's, which you can see in the screenshot here, the SSL slash TLS weaknesses enabling MITM attacks such as Poodle, Logjam, and then there's also the HTTP service vulnerable to DOS, or also known as a slow LoRa's. And then there's another one where there's a possible SQL injection on multiple web pages. So basically, it's showing these issues make the system highly exploitable, and particularly in this lab environment as well. So it's just showing you which is intentionally vulnerable. And then I'll be and I actually use this one a lot to kind of pinpoint which ones I would be using for the next slides that you will see here. Where I'm mitigating the vulnerabilities on the Metasploitable 2 VM. Next up that I had to do for the scans was the Nikto scan. So Nikto scan in command form. You can see here it's Nikto with a switch with a lowercase h, and then it's followed by HTTP : / and then it's the IP address again, of course, of the Metasploitable 2 VM. And I'll just kind of start playing this for you just to kind of see what's going on here and the results that I kind of got for it. And Nikto was a nice one because it kind of gives you output that gives you a fairly detailed web app security snapshot, and it's helping to basically flag the highest risk issues, gives prioritized remediation steps with exact commands and config snippets you can use on a Apache box or whatever it would be. And it also suggests verification and steps as well that you could do. And this was nice. This was a nice add-on additional information that would be needed, especially when you're going to be kind of mitigating, which I will be doing in the next slides that you'll see. So the next one here that I had to do was the OWASP ZAP scan, which was a nice one. It gives much more detail, which was really nice to see here. And basically, this is tested on the Metasploitable 2 VM on the web server, and it found that there is SSL v3 that's enabled, weak TLS settings, and potential information leaks. And these results helped prioritize fixes like disabling SSL v3 and updating OpenSSL. And you can see here, I'm just going to give you guys kind of a walkthrough of it as well. It gives you the alerts, and it kind of tells you if it's high or medium in its critical state. And then it's also giving you a nice description, which was a nice add-on to this. And it kind of just talked about the description of it, other information that you would need. It's kind of giving you a solution or the mitigation in itself, which is really nice, saying to upgrade or to the latest version. And it kind of gives you more things to it as well. So that was really nice. This was really helpful, especially if you're trying to mitigate vulnerabilities. It's telling you and recommending solutions to you. So yeah. So we are off now on to the part C. So in the next slides, I'll be going through the risk assessment, gap analysis, countermeasures, expected results, and strategy. So starting off here, I'm going to be talking about the risk assessment and gap analysis. So I chose these three vulnerabilities for mine. And starting off, you see the VS FTPD version 2.3.4 backdoor vulnerability with CVE 20112523 for the CVE ID number. And the risk level here is high, which was what I was looking for. And then also the impact here was local privilege escalation. The next one that I chose was the SSL slash TLS MITM vulnerability. And this one again was of course high in the risk level. And the impact it had was the decryption of the secure traffic. So straight from the NF scam that I did, it gave me a bunch of information here, and it's talking about having to upgrade, and it's also talking about how there is a problem where it does not properly restrict processing of changed cipher spec messages, which allows the man-in-the-middle attackers to trigger use of a zero-length master key insert an open SSL to open SSL communications, and consequently hijack sessions or obtain sensitive information via a crafted TLS handshake, aka the CCS injection vulnerability. And then last here is the Poodle vulnerability, or POODLE vulnerability. And here it's the CVE 2014-3566 ID number. Type of attack is here man-in-the-middle attack on the SSL 3.0 and some TLS implementations. The target is the old SSL 3.0 encryption protocol. The goal here is to decrypt sensitive data like cookies or session tokens that should be protected by SSL/TLS. So for my gap analysis, when it comes to the gaps, I was able to identify overall included the unnecessary services that were running, such as FTP web servers that weren't being used, and so on. And then there were also outdated binaries, outdated SSL/TLS versions that were still being supported, and there was also no enforced patch processes as well. So this was basically the gap analysis I was able to gather from my scans. So next up here, I wanted to give you guys kind of a rundown of each of the vulnerabilities I did find in a little bit more detail in the next slides. So the first vulnerability I saw here, of course, was the FTP vulnerability on port 21 TCP. And the issue was VSFTPD version 2.3.4 backdoor vulnerability. And the CVE, of course, as I mentioned before, was 20112523. And the details here that I saw was the version of VSFTPD contained a malicious backdoor, and it's exploiting it can provide a root level access to the attacker. So this is why it's important to address it. So here's the second vulnerability, of course, is the SSL/TLS MITM, and it was on the port 5432. Here, like I mentioned before, its issue was the OpenSSL versions before 0.9.8 CA. You can see 1.0.0M and then 1.0.1H have a flaw in handling the change cipher spec CCC messages. And this is the ID number here again, and then the details is that the vulnerable versions aren't effectively looking over the CCCS messages, which is leaving room for the intruder in the middle to be sending out the cultivated CCS message that leaves the session key to all zeros that was mentioned. And then on to the left side, you can see a screenshot of that I found in Map Scan. And here we have third vulnerability, so the Poodle, so POODLE, and what that stands for is padding Oracle on downgraded legacy encryption. If you guys are just kind of interested in what it was standing for instead of just saying Poodle. And then it was on port 25 TCP and then the 5432 TCP. This is the Nmap scan here that you can see of where I was seeing it from. And the issue is here that the intruder uses technique of a man-in-the-middle to exploit flaws or weaknesses in SSL v3. That's the ID number, and then also it can allow an intruder to extract the session data and take over the user accounts to impersonate them. And this is why, again, it's high in the risk level, and that's why it's important to mitigate it. So here I'm going to run down the countermeasures and mitigation plan altogether. And to start off, it is a good idea to take advantage of making immediate solutions that are easy, quick, and immediate, so that it closes those open doors as soon as possible to reduce those damages or risk. So here I would recommend the countermeasure and mitigation plan of firstly having the VSFTPD removed to prevent intruders to have unauthorized access that has the CVE 20112523 vulnerability. In Metasploitable 2, version 2.3.4, it contains a backdoor vulnerability that allows attackers to gain remote shell access. And there's the port 6200, and that is the network port that this backdoor listens on. So if it is open, anyone can attempt to connect and exploit the vulnerability. So you do have three options that you could choose from. So basically, remove the VSFTPD completely if it's not needed. Then there's number 2, which is disable the service so it doesn't run. And then the third one that you could do is block the port in the firewall so network traffic cannot reach it. Then there is turning off the SSL v3 within Apache and making sure that TLS is newer, such as 1.2 or newer, of course. And then for this one, what it is that SSL v3 is an outdated version of the Secure Sockets Layer, SSL. That's what it stands for. And so it's basically the protocol used to encrypt the web traffic. And it has known vulnerabilities, most famously Poodle that I mentioned, the CVE 20143566, which allows attackers to decrypt encrypted data. And then TLS, which is it stands for Transport Layer Security, which has to be 1.2 or newer, is the modern secure protocol that replaces SSL v3 and older TLS versions. And then why it's important is because disabling the SSL v3 prevents attackers from exploiting known weaknesses in the old protocol. And the third thing that I have here is to upgrade the Open SSL patch and restart any of the services that would be using it. So OpenSSL is a widely used library that provides encryption for web servers, email servers, and other network services. So like all software, older versions can have security vulnerabilities such as the CCS injection, and updating the package ensures that the system is going to be running on the latest version of the OpenSSL. So yeah, and then it can also be important to have the next phase or the midterm implications. So basically here is to make sure that there is more robust encryption such as the AES, GCM with the ECDHE. The next one is to make sure that HSTS is enabled, that you should make sure that there is a OCSP stapling and then a centralized log management paired with intrusion detection systems such as SORM or Suricata. And then just the last one here that I put was the continuous plan. That would be really good to use. So for that one, it's really important to make sure that you're keeping the patch management process looked over long term, and of course to make sure to keep up with the external penetration tests as well. So next up are the expected results I have. So the port 6200 will be unreachable and scanners won't be able to detect CVE 2011-2523 anymore. That's what I was kind of just expecting. The next one is the CCS injection vulnerability in OpenSSL would be mitigated with the upgrade that was made. And lastly, SSL v3 connections will become blocked, which will result in Poodle vulnerability not being present anymore. So here I was gonna run down how strategy reduces risk and hardens the system. Hardening the system makes attacks harder. It adds multiple layers of defense. It reduces the overall risk. By fixing the known vulnerabilities early and improving monitoring, we can detect and respond to the threats more effectively. So here I have part D, which is implement hardening. And the screenshot here I provided here first for you is because I wanted to show you that I was able to successfully get into that Metasploitable 2 VM, and I logged into it with, of course, the default as MSF admin. So I will be taking you guys through the implementing hardening parts of the changes in the next slides. So the first one I did was a change for the CVE 2011-2523. So before making any changes, the Nmap shows that TCP port 6200 is open. This is a backdoor from the vulnerable VSFTPD service. I first wanted to stop the TPD service to immediately shut it down, then remove it completely to prevent it from restarting. For additional protection, I wanted to block the port 6200 using the IP tables so that even if the services were accidentally re-enabled, the port would remain inaccessible. After I applied these steps, an Nmap scan should show that the port 6200 is closed or filtered, and then that kind of confirms that the system is no longer exposed to that CVE 2011-2523 backdoor vulnerability. So yeah, that demonstrates that a successful mitigation of a critical vulnerability was done. And then also I wanted to mention that these are the commands that were used as well. So you can see that one of them was to stop VSFTPD, and then so on, as you can see. So next up here are the changes for the CVE 2014-0224. So to mitigate the SSL TLS MITM risks, I had to update the OpenSSL and restart services that use it. I had to update the packages list, install the available OpenSSL updates, and then restart the Apache and SSH so they load the patch library. You can see that the commands I used here were sudo apt-get update and so on. And basically after this, I reran the scanners, so the OWASP, the Nmap, and what I would expect is a CCS MITM finding to clear if the patched OpenSSL was installed. And the restarting service is critical because running processes keep using the old library until they restart it. So if this package can't be upgraded on this VM, I was able to just wanted to document that and use the network controls like firewall or segmentation as a temporary compensating control if I wanted to do that, of course. And then for Poodle, which was known as the CVE 2014-3566, I wanted to make sure that I'm turning off this SSL v3 in the Apache's SSL TLS configuration. And as you can see on the slide, these were the commands that were used in the process. So part E, I'm going to be taking you through the reflection and evaluation in these next slides. So why I chose these changes, starting off, I'm going to be talking about the CVE 2011-2523, which is a VSFTPD backdoor vulnerability. So I stopped and removed the VSFTPD service and unblocked port 6200. Why I did it is because it's quick, it's low cost mitigation that immediately removes remote code execution risk. And after the change, running netsat with a switch TULPN should show that this port 6200 is no longer open, confirming that the vulnerability was mitigated. Next one was the CVE 2014-0224. It's the OpenSSL CCS MITM vulnerability. And updating the OpenSSL library removes that vulnerable versions that allows MITM attacks via the CCS flaw. And it's a fast way to prevent potential session hijacking and protect the organization from damage, and that's why I chose that one. And then the last one is the CVE 2014-3566, which is the Poodle vulnerability. And Poodle exploits SSL v3 to decrypt traffic, so disabling the SSL v3 in the server configuration can remove this exposure. And then the modern clients already prefer the TLS 1.2 or higher, so this change reduces risk with minimal impact on functionality. And then lastly, the summary is that these targeted, basically like an overall summary of this is that these targeted changes directly address the 3 selected vulnerabilities, removing immediate attack vectors and then strengthening the overall system security. So that's kind of just like the overall idea of why I chose those changes. So next here is which vulnerabilities impacted by the changes. So first up, of course, is the CVE 2011-2523. And I removed the VSFTPD entry point and blocked this port 6200, which closed the remote shell backdoor, and it greatly reduces the chance of a full system compromise. Next up is the SSL TLS MITM vulnerability. Applying the OpenSSL patch fixes the CCS vulnerability that's preventing the session hijacking MITM attacks on affected OpenSSL versions. And lastly, the Poodle vulnerability, which is disabling the SSL v3, stops downgrade and padding Oracle attacks. And then it's protecting the encrypted traffic by forcing modern TLS versions instead. So next up, I'll be taking you through the expected versus the actual results. Expected was that the CVEs 2011-2523 to not be identified by the Nmap and have the port 6200 closed rather than open. I wanted the Poodle no longer is showing in the scan and SSL v3 blocked, and then the CVE 2014-0224 is mitigated through an upgrade. And the actual outcomes observed was that VSFTPD was removed, which was in a successful manner, which shut off the remote entry. Then we have the SSL v3 disabled and testing with the OpenSSL client, which is a switch SSL 3 failed as expected. And then OpenSSL upgraded on patched systems. Now to wrap it up, I was able to have some lessons that I learned. And first here was that by disabling or removing unused services like the old file sharing protocols like test servers or default, basically shrinks the system's attack surface, and this makes it much harder for attackers to find vulnerabilities to exploit, makes the management aspect easier. I also realized to establish irregular patching and vulnerability scanning processes. Next up was to use consistent secure TLS settings across all servers to prevent weak configurations, to disable protocols like SSL-v3, which are vulnerable to attacks like the POODLE, or you could say Poodle, to ensuring only strong encryption is used. So these are just kind of the lessons that I learned throughout the process of it. And here are some of the references that I was able to refer to throughout this whole entire process. And I hope you guys enjoy this presentation, and thank you for listening.